Imperils effort to rein in banks, EU lawmakers say. First it was free trade, then the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, European lawmakers are warning that President Donald Trump's anti-globalist agenda threatens to erode years of cooperation on financial regulations forged after the 2008 crisis. European Parliament members are traveling to Washington this week to meet with top lawmakers and other officials, where they can air their concerns about the U.S. commitment to international rules. The meetings come amid moves by the Trump administration and Congress to roll back bank regulations. The recommendations, especially coming from the Treasury Department, are constituting a kind of America First policy in financial regulation, said Markus Ferber, a vice chairman of the Parliament's Economic Committee. This is a considerable deviation from our international agreed standards, he said. We have the feeling that the United States is going to leave this path. In withdrawing from the landmark Paris Climate Accord in a speech last month, Trump declared that he was elected to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris, underscoring his vow to put America's interests above global concerns. For EU bank regulators, it was a curious choice of locations for Trump. It was in Pittsburgh, at a G20 meeting in 2009, where world leaders recognized the need to work together to rescue and regulate the financial markets after the worst crash since the Great Depression. For us, Pittsburgh is still valid, said Ferber, a German representing Bavaria who is aligned with Chancellor Angela Merkel. Facing financial instability and mounting unemployment in the US and EU, the world leaders agreed in September 2009 to require banks to bulk up on capital so they could withstand future shocks. They committed to centralize trading in derivatives, the unregulated financial instruments that helped spark the credit meltdown. And they approved the overhaul of rules for executive compensation that had encouraged excessive risk-taking. The U.S. House passed legislation last month that would gut many of the post-crisis banking reforms, and Trump's Treasury Department is proposing to curtail some key regulations. Trump, in setting the tone at the top, is clearing the way for a weakening of crucial regulations, said Martin Wheatley, who headed the UK Financial Conduct Authority until September 2015. A breakdown in regulatory cooperation risks seeding the next financial crisis, he said. We shouldn't forget that. During their meetings in Washington and New York this week, the Europeans will voice those worries to American financial regulators and lawmakers. Among them, Jay Clayton, the chairman of the SEC, Christopher Giancarlo, the head of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and Stanley Fischer, the vice chair of the Federal Reserve Board. They're also scheduled to meet with officials from Trump's National Economic Council. On Capitol Hill, the members of the European Parliament will talk with powerful lawmakers, including Senate Banking Chairman Mike Crapo and Representative Peter Roskam, chairman of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee for Tax Policy, before heading to New York. The U.S.EU divergence on regulation focuses on agreements reached since the financial crisis in the city of Basel on the Rhine River in Switzerland. There, U.S. banking regulators and their counterparts from around the world have drawn up banking rules for countries to follow. The U.S. new hesitancy to advance Basel regulations has Ferber and other Europeans displeased. Ferber mentioned two items in the Basel banking standards: one, called the Net Stable Funding Ratio, which tries to ensure that banks have enough liquidity during a crisis, and another aimed at reining in trading risks for the lenders. In a June report, the U.S. Treasury Department recommended delaying implementation of both standards, saying these regulations would pile unnecessary burdens on banks. In a July 12 speech, the governor of France's central bank, François Villeroy de Gallet, criticized the Treasury. Such changes would be completely different and would be a source of great concern for all, he said. Any temptation of competitive deregulation would be a lose-lose game, which would increase the risk of a new financial crisis. International cooperation on financial sector regulation is our common good. Nicolas Veron, a senior fellow at Bruegel, a Brussels-based think tank, says the Europeans are overreacting. There is no real evidence that the U.S. is ripping up agreements, said Veron, a visiting fellow at the Peterson Institute in Washington. The Treasury report was hardly draconian, he said, and many of the people Trump has appointed to regulate financial markets are considered moderates, including Rand Paul, who has been picked to become the Fed's top regulator. The Europeans are right to complain about trade and climate, but at this point I wouldn't extend that to financial regulation, Varun said. Yet for global financial companies, antipathy over financial regulation poses a major risk: retaliation. In November, the European Union proposed to force U.S. banks with significant operations on the continent to establish separate holding companies to keep capital and liquidity in the bloc. Banks are concerned that they will be hit with higher costs and decreased flexibility in times of market stress. Bankers saw the move as retaliation for a U.S. regulation that required all the largest banks to set up holding companies. U.S. companies are closely watching to see if EU officials go ahead with that move. "I do fear that we are on the edge of the precipice with regulations fragmenting," said Jeremy Newell, an executive managing director at the Clearing House, a lobbying group for global banks, who was also speaking in Paris. That, Newell said, would have enormous costs. White House announces new theme weeks amid healthcare bill uncertainty. Piscataway Township, NJ. With Republicans' healthcare bill in jeopardy, the White House is once again turning to a series of unrelated themed weeks to organize President Donald Trump's schedule. Over the next 3 weeks, the White House will hold events pertaining to 3 vaguely defined themes: Made in America, American Heroes and American Dreams. Administration officials bristled at the notion that the themed weeks could distract from the debate over repealing and replacing Obamacare, one of the president's biggest policy priorities. Every day and every week, in a sense, is a healthcare week, a senior administration official told reporters during a briefing here. It's something that enormous White House and administration resources have been devoted to since day one. This week will include at least 2 events tied to the Made in America theme, including a product showcase, in which American-made products from all 50 states will be brought to the White House. On Wednesday, the president will issue a proclamation on the importance of making products in America, White House spokeswoman Helena Aguirre-Fair said Sunday. Fair declined to say whether the president would use the week to push his daughter Ivanka Trump to manufacture products from her fashion line in the United States instead of overseas. "We'll get back to you on that," she said. Many of the president's own branded products are made overseas as well. A Friday story in the Washington Post shows that the fashion line manufactures its products in foreign factories. Fair offered few details on the other 2 themed weeks on the schedule, though she suggested the American Heroes Week will include military veterans. She also declined to say whether the president made calls to senators over the weekend on the health care bill. "The president has been monitoring what's going on with health care, and he and his staff have been involved with what's going on in the Senate," she said. Asked for a reaction to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's decision to defer a vote on the health care bill as Senator John McCain recovers from surgery, Fair said simply, "We wish Sen. McCain a speedy recovery." White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and other senior administration officials began organizing themed weeks in early May amid concerns that the president's public schedule lacked direction. But the president has consistently stepped on the White House's messaging with his tweets on everything from the Russia investigation to his travel ban. Some in the White House have privately acknowledged that the weeks haven't been as successful as they hoped. But they note that some previous administrations took a similar approach in order to better organize president's events. The White House's past themed weeks, which focused on infrastructure, workforce development, technology and energy, have faced mockery on social media, with the president's critics noting that major news events like former FBI Director James Comey's testimony before Congress have largely overshadowed the administration's efforts. Watchdog group says Trump will have to turn over MarALago visitor records. Government watchdog group Citizens for Responsible Ethics in Washington said Monday that President Donald Trump's administration will have to release visitor records for his private MarALago club in response to a lawsuit it filed, though it's far from clear it will get what it's looking for. Crew, which filed suit with the National Security Archive and the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University for logs of visitors from MarALago, the White House and Trump Tower, said the Department of Homeland Security has agreed to release MarALago's logs by September 8. The group has vowed to share the records publicly. The public deserves to know who is coming to meet with the president and his staff, said Noah Bookbinder, Crew's executive director. We are glad that as a result of this case, this information will become public for meetings at his personal residences, but it needs to be public for meetings at the White House as well. The group declared it a major Crew victory in a tweet Monday morning, but it's unclear what records the group will receive. Politico reported in March that despite efforts from Democrats to obtain records of who's coming in and out of Trump's private clubs, no one is actually keeping track. MarALago, Trump's winter White House, doesn't log its guests, even when the president is visiting the South Florida Seaside Club. Unlike entry into the White House, getting into MarALago doesn't require a comprehensive background check or a weapons screening. Members of the private club do frequently submit guests' names to the front desk for informal visits and events, but that process doesn't require personal details such as a birth date or social security number. There's also no official check-in procedure for guests entering MarALago. Asked about the apparent discrepancy, Crew spokesman Jordan Libowitz replied, "We don't know exactly what records they have." He explained that court documents call for DHS to produce records of presidential visitors at MarALago. What that means is somewhat of a mystery, but whatever records they kept, we will be getting, Libowitz added. According to Crew, DHS has said it has no records of Trump Tower visitors, but the lawsuit is ongoing for access to White House visitors, which Politico has documented in lieu of the administration's voluntary disclosure. A DHS spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment.